What's going on, guys? Welcome into episode number 7 of the Male Mind Podcast. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm here with my co-host, Louie, and we have a very special guest in the building today. Louie, go ahead and introduce our guest.
My man, today we have Bryce, Prescott, you guys. Me and Bryce have been friends for a while. We're actually connected through social media again. We have a friend, a mutual friend, Sean Whalen, and I have loved Bryce's stuff, his energy. I met his wife. Really, really happy to have him here because he's speaking a lot on what we're trying to change in the world, and that's, the male mind. So Bryce, welcome, brother.
Dude, thanks so much, guys, for having me here. I'm
Yeah.
really honored to be here and talk about these important things, men's health and all that. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And we've been watching your social media in prep for this, and you've been talking about this recently. So you had a couple of reels come out not too long ago about some of your opinions of where we're at as men, kind of some of the things that society has kind of shifted a little bit. So talk to us about that. Let's start there. Why make content like that? You're a podcast producer. You have a very successful media company. So where does that passion for men's health issues come from?
Well, it comes from a desire to know and understand truth, honestly. We're in an interesting situation culturally where up is being promoted as down and down is being promoted as up. And when you look at a lot of the things and challenges that men are facing nowadays, they're going unnoticed or they're being minimized. And I just kind of went along for a while, and then it came to a point in the last several months where I'm like, we got to talk about this.
Yeah.
I had a really powerful experience where I joined this group that was out of Southern California that was called the Ascend Brotherhood. And it's just a bunch of entrepreneurs, successful dudes. We get together, and there's no reason other than joy for us to get together. We get together, we play spike ball at the beach, we go go-kart racing, we just fuck around and bust each other's balls. And having a tribe and a network of dudes, that we're not trying to sell each other anything. It's not a mastermind type thing. We're not talking about KPIs and marketing and all that shit. Like we're really just being there for each other. And my first experience, it really opened up my mind to the reality of how we used to be tribal based. Everything about what a man's purpose was, what his identity was associated with his role in the family and in the tribe. And when you look at society nowadays, that's completely up in the air, but yet we don't technically need tribes anymore to survive, but we do need them to thrive. And so this opened my mind to a lot of, like, men are hurting. There's a lot of loneliness. There's a lot of, just pushing down their stuff. They don't know how to talk about it. They don't have a place to talk about it. And I've been fortunate enough in my life to have a little bit of success and to create a platform. And I'm like, well, I'm going to talk about it now. Let's actually talk about this, because the world doesn't need more cucks. We don't need more emasculated men. To me, the idea of toxic masculinity is a farce. There's no such thing as toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
There's toxic people and toxic femininity. And there's just crappy people. And when you have aggressive, over-the-top behaviors from men, they get slapped with toxic thing. And we're trying to, I want to redefine that. Like, there's nothing toxic about being a true leader as a man. There's nothing toxic about providing for your family, about presiding over your home, being a natural leader, and being that sort of safe space for your spouse or for your partner, so that you can actually have, dare I say it, traditional gender roles in the family.
Yeah.
That's just how you build a successful place for men, and it's eroding, and I can't stand it anymore. I want to be a voice in that space.
Well, I think it's crazy that, and you said the trigger word, right? Traditional gender roles. Nowadays, that just has become taboo. People want to do things, in different ways. But there's this term that I'd love to get your opinion on. You talk about toxic masculinity, but people talk about being an alpha male, the alpha. Some people say that that's a bad thing. It's a good thing. Alpha.
My wife hates that word.
How do you define that concept, though, of the alpha male as it's portrayed today?
Well, see, here's the interesting part about that word and that persona, and I'll add thirdly that archetype.
Right. Yep.
So the alpha male is basically just the leader. The role of the alpha, if you look at in nature, I mean,
look at a wolf pack.
Wolf packs, dogs. I mean, there's always like the alpha. And I don't think at all that alpha energy is actually truly embedded or tied into masculinity, because just because you might not be an alpha doesn't mean you're not masculine. And so I think that the alpha moniker and that sort of energy is more of a leadership place as opposed to it being something masculine, because there's very masculine, strongly, just strong men that aren't the alpha of their tribe.
Yeah.
But yet they are the leader of their home. And so, or their business or their whatever. And so to me, it's just more of a hierarchy thing. It's like there's a spectrum.
Right.
I could be the alpha in one room and be a complete runt in the other room. And so when we look at that from a cultural standpoint or with men and masculinity, I think that men, they don't have to aspire to be like that guy.
100%.
But I think that it does well for men to aspire to lead.
Yeah. And that's true, because my whole life, and when I was younger, I wanted to be the alpha. I wanted to be like the boss man. I wanted to grow into this role that, honestly, after 5 years of me having some success, I realized that people don't like that. People love me for my leadership, how I speak, what I do, the love and compassion that I have for other people. That has made me a better leader, because I thought I want to be the boss. I want to be the man, which actually didn't make me the man. You know what I'm saying? So I get it. I understand it for sure.
Well, I mean, just I think dudes just need to be fine with being a dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not that complex, right? It's just, I think that we try to make so much of it. Like you said, we want to be a certain thing. We see certain things on social media. We feel that we should look a certain type of way. And we've talked about this in the previous episodes, and I wanted to get your take on relationships just for a little bit. We had a conversation with someone who was in this situation where she recently got married. Her husband is like really into video games. She feels that he doesn't really pay attention to her much anymore. Whenever they hang out, he always invites his buddies. You talked a lot about communication, but what would you say to men that are having these relationship issues? Maybe we kind of go towards our homies, our buddies. We leave, whether it's video games, we go drink, we go play sports, we come to the gym, but things at home are not in order. What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, anybody that has, addictive behavior like that really consumes them, there's some work that needs to be done there. There's a reason for the sedation. And whether it's video games, whether it's pornography, whether it's drugs, whether it's food, whether it's the gym, like you can actually have healthy things be your addiction. And those things come from a place inside of you that only you know and that you have to reconcile. Relationships are a funny thing, man, because you have, especially monogamous, committed relationships, when you have a male and a female, traditionally, the power dynamic there. I've seen that most of those problems stem because a man won't lead. I've had conversations with many, many women in many different ages, even 20s, 30s, 40s, and older. And there's an epidemic in dudes that won't step up, that won't go get the bag, that won't, the three things: protect, provide, and preside. Women crave this on an energetic level.
Yeah.
It makes them wet. It gets them hot. Like they want their guy to be like, no, I got this.
Yep.
But I've seen this thing happen because of divorce and because of some things that happen in our country. And this is a global thing, I believe, on a certain scale, but it's more prevalent here in the United States. We have more and more people being raised by single mothers because of divorce. There's a court system that does not favor at all the father.
Right.
And so what happens is a woman thinks she can raise a man, and she can't. You can't raise a man if you're a woman. A man is what it takes to raise a man. And so we have men that are really feminized, that are effeminate even, that are being taught softer, more, I guess, detrimental ways of coping and
Right.
of leading in the family. And next thing you know, you've got relationships where the guy doesn't have the balls to be like, yo, I need this from you. Can we do that? To like actually have that. We hear a lot about having the hard conversation in your
Right,
relationship. Well, the precursor to having the hard conversation is being able to lead yourself to a place where you know that has to happen, and then you do it in spite of any sort of pain or inconvenience or emotional issue that it would be to talk about those hard things.
Yeah, you just do it. And Lou, you talked a couple weeks ago about how you grew up basically without your father
Yeah.
for the majority of at least your childhood.
Yeah.
So how did you reconcile that? Because you were raised by not a single mother, but you could say a mother that had to do most of the work because your
Right.
father was not present.
Right.
What was that like for you?
So for me, it was a little bit different. I mean, my father moved to the U.S. I had no idea what he was doing. He was actually making a future for me, right? So what happened was I held so much resentment and pain because I didn't grow up with my dad. My dad wasn't around. I was 10 years old. He brought me to America, brand new space. I'm like, who is this guy? Like, I don't even know this guy. So for a long time, I didn't realize that I was brought up with a single mom, and I had a lot of female tendencies. I had a lot of, the cooking, the cleaning, and I thought that was right. So when my father came into play and he was trying to teach me these new manly roles, I was like, this isn't right. This is not correct. So I held a lot of resentment for him because he wanted me to be a certain way, strict, driven, you have to get shit done. And it took me till I was 25 to actually forgive my dad because it was on me. Because I had a different mentality growing up. Years passed. I was like, wait, like I should be a lot more, manly. My mom was just trying to do her best, right? And it took me probably 10 years to tell my dad, hey, I'm sorry. It took me a long time to realize what you did for me and what you have done for me and why you treated me the way you did. And now, fast forward, I'm in a good place that I can have both feminine and manly male traits. I think it's really doable to have, but you also, like you said, you have to know who you are inside, and you have to work through those issues so you don't have you have a perfect balance.
Well, let me be clear about something because I think it's important to interject this here. I don't think there's really such a thing. I mean, there is things that like the feminine energy
Right.
is more inclined. It's more easy for the feminine energy to do, and there's things that the masculine energy is more. And as individuals, we have a combination of both of those inside of us. And to me, it's about like making sure that you honor both and have them in their proper place. I've seen with women, for example, like you'll see single women that'll get sick of dating and they don't want to deal with it. And they really harden into their masculine energy where they're the ones having to lead their family. They're the ones making the money. They're the ones. And it's a more rigid, sort of harder energy.
Right.
And so it makes it difficult oftentimes for those women when they get into a relationship to kind of let that guard back down 100%. And to really allow themselves to be feminine. And that's one of the beautiful things as an incentive for me as a man. It's like there's nothing more attractive than a truly feminine, beautiful woman that desires you. The desire of a beautiful woman, the feminine attraction towards you as a man, there's nothing better, dude.
Yeah.
But in order to receive that, you have to be firmly resolute in your masculine. And that masculine includes self-leadership. Like you have to do what you say and say what you do. That's a part of the leadership that's required. It starts internally.
Yeah.
If you can't do that for yourself, there's no way you're going to get your kids to do that. There's no way your spouse is going to fall in line. There's not fall in line in that like there's some sort of rigid thing, but it's like when you're a family or a couple or a relationship in that way, there's an objective in healthy ones. Like where are we going? What are our mutual goals? What are our individual goals? And men have it's the benefit is an exponential growth curve when you finally settle in as a dude and realize, okay, I got to get my ass in shape. I got to go get the bag. I got to make money, and I got to lead. You do that, you'll have the pick of anybody you want in life. Now, you do that within the framework of a relationship. Watch that relationship transform because one of two things will happen. The woman will love it, and she will then be there ready for it, or she can't handle it, and she'll bolt. And you'll be able to have the one that will.
But either way, you'll know.
You'll know. And that's a beautiful thing. People don't want to know. They like living in this gray area where they don't, I don't know. Why don't you talk to your wife? I don't know. I don't want to piss her off. Like,
that's so true. So 5 years ago, I think me and Cass were growing. I was growing very, very fast. The business was thriving. And I remember this conversation, and thank you for bringing this up because I sat down with Cass and I said, okay, This is where we're at. We're busy. We're slammed. I need you to, get some shit together here. Do you want to be a stay-at-home mom? Or do you want to help me build this empire? I gave her a day. Next day, she came to me and she said, I want to build the empire. I said, okay, let's do it. And that was actually really hard for me because, again, Catholic, LDS, she was LDS. She grew up in the church. And I was trying to find this balance of like, what do I do or say to make her feel safe and not come off like a dick? But I wanted to let her know, like, hey, like, we're in this predicament. I need to know where you stand. And you're right. Some men don't want to have those conversations because they feel bad or whatever. No, you have to get shit down, write it down, talk about it, make those goals happen. So there is that perfect balance in your relationship,
And I think the key thing is what you mentioned, that we are the catalyst.
Yeah.
That's where it has to start. It has to start within yourself, and then everything else kind of starts to fall in line. I resonate with what you said because my mother-in-law was a single mom, and she is in that masculine energy. Like she will say it all the time. I was father and mother, and I raised you, and she worked. So she struggles with relationships, all that stuff. So I relate to that 100%. And that brings me to my next point, which is the relationship with your parents. When we've had conversations, and we've gone through this ourselves, of a lot of men have these, call them what you want, call them daddy issues, mommy issues, whatever it is. What would you say to somebody that feels like that feels some type of way towards their parents and maybe uses that as, call it perhaps an excuse or a reason why they don't get shit done because of the way I was parented or what my parents did?
Right. Well, I'll start by saying that none of it actually matters, meaning that every single individual has a weird relationship with their parents. You have the people that were raised with attentive mom and dad. They weren't divorced. They had money. It was suburbs, the whole thing. They got issues with how mom and dad handled things because mom and dad were too controlling and I had to get good grades and all this stuff. And then you have the broken homes and mom and dad. So everybody has a reason to look at their parents as a aspect of the health that they need to gain. Right. And so my encouragement with that is just to look at it as an opportunity. You're not special if you have issues with your parents. Everybody does. Everybody does. And so that means that there's an opportunity there for you just to fix your shit. It's like, I've had this belief, and I think that this applies to this as well. When you talk about things like, race issues or homophobia or things, just any potential discrimination that could be labeled as systemic, right? There's all this stuff about, in our country, like the systemically this and systemically that. Every person, it's like playing Hold'em. It doesn't matter the cards that you're dealt. It's how you play the cards against the other deck. So you could have a 2 and a 3 and still win the pot if you played them right. And the only way that you can play them right is if you own your own experiences. And so when you transition that into thinking like, how do I handle stuff with my parents? It's up to you to figure that out. You're not special. Everybody's got it. You got to handle it.
You got to have the conversations, be willing to say, hey, mom, dad.
You have to look at your parents. One of the hardest things for me, I'll share this a little bit. I've got a really interesting dynamic with my parents in that my father he's in his 70s now. And for lack of a better description, he's a broken man. His health is crap. He's never followed his dream. He was with my mother the whole time since he was 23, and now they're just barely getting divorced. He doesn't have any money. Like, he's just this shell of a person. And my mom and the dynamic there has created stuff where, like, my relation with my parents is inverted. They come to me for stuff, for advice, for money, for all of the things. And for the longest time, I had that as a chip on my shoulder because I felt like, no, I don't have a guy I can go to when I need advice because I'm too busy giving advice to my parents. Fast forward a little bit, doing the work on that has allowed me to realize, like, it's an opportunity. I have an opportunity to truly own my successes in a way that nobody gets to take credit for it. It's not because daddy had some money or that daddy helped me do this or that mommy did this or whatever. Like, I did it. Okay. Now I realize there's certain other opportunities that people have where they were given those, and that's fine. I'm not disparaging or talking any mess on that. I'm just saying, like, look at the situation with your parents as an opportunity for you to grow. And even because they're blood, you're not required to keep them around. There's a lot of really toxic parents.
Yeah.
Demanding, demeaning, controlling. Get them
Got it.
out. Like, you don't have to keep them around. Especially, like, as a child, you have to deal with that for sure. But when you're an adult, you can get rid of them.
And
Detachment.
how do you deal with that guilt, if you will, of it's my parents, maybe they can be manipulative to some degree. So how do you handle that? How do you cut off such a strong connection? What would you say to that?
And that's the same thing that happened to me. I had to learn how to detach myself. Now, I don't want to sound rude or mean, but I'm pretty good at detaching myself from people. If you are not giving me any value in my life, I have no problem leaving you behind. It may sound shitty to some people, it may sound rude, but that's how I work. Because my value and my energy I vibrate in such a high level. And again, high successors vibrate at a really, really high level. And I remember I had to detach myself from my parents for a very long time because they were wanting more from me because I was succeeding. I finished school. I did all these things that they couldn't do. So again, they were trying to, like, I wouldn't say pry, but it was, oh, you made it. You did the American dream. I want it back. So I actually told them, like, you guys are actually sucking my energy. So I left for a little bit. I moved out, got my first house. Me and Cass moved out. And I told them, you guys need to realize that you guys can't control me anymore. I am a grown-ass man. I have my duties, responsibilities. My job now is to help my brothers, have them look at me for what I'm doing. You've done your job. But the conversation was tough because they were very, very draining.
Well, you care about them. You
And I
love them.
care,
Like, it's,
But
Yeah.
me doing that made our relationship so much better because they had to see it for themselves.
oh, and for me, a lot of that too has to do with how you perceive the relationship. For the longest time, I was consistently disappointed by my parents, and it would bother me, and it would weigh on me, and it would affect my results in real life. And then I would internalize that. I was like, well, if that's where I came from, I've got to be a piece of that as well. And it just was this sort of big, mind trip. But when I was able to get a little bit of perspective and I started realizing the idea that my parents are still on their own journey, they've had way less tools than I've had to try to understand who I am. And on top of that, they're from a generation that doesn't really care about that. And they just kind of live through their things. And so I started looking at them legitimately like 6 years old. Like, if a 6-year-old was to come in here and start wrecking things, you wouldn't hold them to the standard of a 30-year-old. You're like, oh, buddy, what are you doing? You wouldn't yell. You wouldn't get angry. You wouldn't get invested. You should know better. Like, it was a different experience. And so when I started realizing that on a maturity level, I was expecting more than was there, and I lowered that expectation, it made things to where I could actually love them better. I could enjoy being around them. I didn't have high expectations. I didn't disown them or cut them out, but I was like, oh, there it is. Okay. Go put your toys away and make your bed.
No, that's a tremendous insight because that's actually my exact same experience. Exactly the same. So I'm a real estate broker. My mom is an agent. She works with me. She doesn't have the skills. I often have to help her with even basic things, contracts, things like that. And I often get frustrated because she has not yet been able to become independent. And I get frustrated. My dad in the same way. My dad started a little business. There were some things that he did that I felt were mistakes and the business wasn't going very well. Now he's thinking about transitioning. So I felt the exact same way and this is now, like recently, I felt a lot of frustration towards my parents of, why don't you get this? Or the feeling of, why don't you just do what I say?
Right.
And so for me, it's this interesting mind trip because sometimes I feel like the arrogance of saying my parents should do what I say, but then I resonate with what you say in the sense that they haven't had the tools.
Yeah.
I've had the benefit of mentors and,
Social
courses
media.
or learning. So that's a really, really great insight.
Yeah.
Let's flip that to parenting now. We're talking about how we were parented. What about our parenting? When we have our kids, I have a 6-year-old, and I think about that all the time of, how do I avoid my parents' mistakes? How do I try to create a good relationship with him? What are the issues that he's going to have? So how do you view parenting?
I view parenting a similar way that I view my own self-development, in that I have to do what I say. and I have to hold a boundary. I'm not like, I have my youngest is 13. She'll be 14 this summer. And because of the pandemic and things, like, it was a little dicey there. Like, I was kind of concerned about the direction of where she was going to go and kind of some of the influences that she had. But I've noticed that when you trust your children to do the right thing because they see you do it, that's the best dynamic. They're not always going to do the right thing. And sometimes every child is different. They're all different. And you don't get to choose what their personalities are going to be like. They just kind of show up, which is part of the fun. But I've noticed that with parenting, it's an expectation of a boundary, whatever that boundary is. Here's what I want you to do. Here's what you're required to do. Here's what the rules are, whatever, of the family, of school, of whatever. And you're loving and soft up to that boundary. If they break that boundary, there's a bunch of different styles of how you can parent and discipline and all that. But like, I've felt that it's not my job to be my child's friend, but it is my job to be friendly to my child.
I love
Which is
that.
an interesting distinction.
Yes.
Very important distinction.
Very important. And that you guys gotta learn how to learn what those two mean, especially if you are a parent. Because I've heard in the past, oh, my mom's my best friend. Where's the respect factor in that? You know?
Well, see, I have 4 children technically. My oldest is technically my stepson. He's 21. And him and I have had an interesting relationship over the years because I came into his life when he was 3 years old. And I think on a subconscious level, he carried some sort of odd guilt in opening up to me, as if by having me as his stepfather would in some way love his dad less, or which, like, he struggled with that. And actually up until he turned 21. I've had a really, like, he turned 21, we took him to Vegas and got him high and like just had a really good time. And like, he's been a completely different, like, he's appreciated me more. He's been more vocal about it. It's been an interesting thing. I then have 2 daughters that are 20 and 18, and they have lived a majority of their life out of state with their mother. And this is one of those things where it kind of breaks my heart, because my wife at the time, we split up and she immediately moved away. I did some mistakes when it came to how I handled it that allowed her to do that. I didn't know that you could force them to stay here in the state and everything. It was a really challenging situation. But with them, they've had influences for most of their life that are completely opposite of what I would ever allow or espouse politically, about health and fitness, about life, about money, all of it.
Right.
And I used to get really bothered by that and push against it. And it actually caused like really stark distance between us. Like, the pandemic was a convenient excuse, but we didn't see each other for 3 years during that time. Last Christmas, I took my family to Newport. We rented a beach house on the beach, and I invited my 2 girls to, like, hey, come out. It's going to be a week we're there. You know, just come hang with the family. We haven't seen each other forever. And it was a beautiful thing in that I could tell that from a distance, they were noticing the difference in the life and lifestyle that I live and the things that are important to me and things that I require. Even so much that the conversations that I had with both of those girls, I could tell there was hope for them. It was like, okay, so they're going to get out of the house. They're going to be away from certain influences. And unfortunately, that's when my job as a parent is really going to start having an impact, because they're going to be adults without the tools they need to really be successful adults, and I'm ready to help them.
But I think that speaks to what you said previously of, if you do the right thing, if you're okay, if you just lead by example, then the chips will just fall. Like, they will see it, they will see those contrasts, and they'll adopt a lot of what you're doing. Now you mentioned, if I may, dive a little bit more into your separation. You mentioned that you split up with your wife. Talk to us a little bit about that. Somebody that is listening, that is going through that has gone through that. Maybe that is the thing that is keeping them down. That's the reason why they're overweight, they're stressed. They don't give a fuck anymore.
Yeah.
Because of the stress of that breakup. What do you say to somebody that is on that boat?
Well, I would say it to the same as anybody else. Like, you have to get good with you.
Yep.
Like, there's such an epidemic of people feeling unlovable, unworthy of success, unworthy of a great life. They don't believe in themselves.
Yep.
And when you add in the toxicity of a breakup or a bad separation or a divorce, it just compounds. And it leads to all sorts of unhealthy habits. You know, people use more drugs during that time. They use more
Alcohol.
use alcohol, pornography, or even just random sex with whoever. Like they kind of fall off the rails. But it all starts internally. If some random stranger was to walk into this room right now and start talking a bunch of shit on us, we wouldn't who is this guy? Get out of here.
Yeah.
But because of the intimacy and connection of a partner like that, it's a lot easier for those daggers to land.
Yeah.
And so it's way more important to actually, at those points, to really get good with you first.
Mm-hmm.
To like find the things about you that you love about you.
Yeah.
The things that make you a good person, that make you a good friend, that make you whatever. But I also want to say this too, man, you're not alone, dude. One of the things that I think gets lost in the conversation about masculinity and male mental health and men's issues is that we forget that it still hurts.
Mm-hmm.
We're still emotional creatures. We feel jealousy and we feel hurt and resentment and we have all these emotions and we just have to deal with them differently.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And there's help. And that's why it's so important to have really good male friends. It's important to have a tribe of people you can go to. That's why places like your gym here are an incredible gift to dudes. They can come work out. They can push themselves. They can have there be that camaraderie there. They get their mindset right because of what they're doing with their body, and then they go out into the world, and it makes everything better. So people that are in that space, no matter the hardship, whether it's divorce or somebody died or issues with your kids or bankruptcy or whatever it is, you caused it on some level.
Yeah.
I think that is key. Let's dive into that. Say that again. You caused it at some level.
On
What do you
some
mean by that?
level. There's a lot of self-development talk where they say like, well, you create your life and every result that you have is because of you. And that if it is to be, it is up to me. And there's all these silly mantras and phrases that are true
Right.
with an asterisk. On some level, we created it, either through omission or commission. Either we didn't fix the relationship so that it wouldn't become what it was, or we didn't. Whether we didn't manage our money right so that it could do what it needed to, or we didn't. Whether we didn't handle our body right, or we did. So on some core level, we allowed a thought to dictate an action. And the reason why it's important to acknowledge that is because it's an ownership thing. Look around our culture. It's victim everywhere.
Yes.
I was watching a South Park episode the other night, and it was hilarious because they had this whole thing where they were trying to help these kids with their brand and figure out what your brand is. And every part of somebody's brand is oh, you're a victim too. You're this and this and this and victim. You have to be a victim to be in our culture nowadays. And that idea is just, it's gross to me.
Yeah.
When you're a victim, you're giving away all your power. You need external things to succeed. It goes against every truly tried and true success-based principle out there. Ownership is the first step. You have to own your life.
Yeah.
I did it on some level. I might not know how I did this to myself. I mean, because it can get really, somebody could be raped or a child could die. Oh, really? I did this to myself? Well, that's a little bit more dicey of a thing there. But there's something about that experience that you're allowing to control you. And that ownership of that control, you're not letting go of and you did create that. So we have way more power than we give ourselves credit for. And I think that people are scared to.
And I love that concept of extreme accountability. And you see this every day, Lou, because you're training people, and in fitness, it's such a visible thing.
Yeah.
You either stayed on meal plan or you didn't. You either did your workout or you didn't. You did your cardio or you didn't. And so you have this very black and white picture of people. So talk to us a little bit about that when you're training your folks and they're not doing what they're supposed to. How do you get them to understand this concept of extreme accountability when they give you the excuses? Oh, it's because of this. Oh, it's because
I think for me, definitely it comes down to building them up first and finding out what's the actual truth of why you're not doing what I'm telling you to do. Again, that comes from rape, divorce, their parents, fear of failing again because they did a meal plan that didn't work before, they gained weight. They have a lot of traumas that they have to go through to even get to the gym. There's so many things that people don't realize that they have. Now, my job is to kind of figure out those things and help them. Very, very small. Oh, I don't have time. You have time. Let me show you how to do it. Oh, my partner doesn't help me. Bring your husband in. I'll talk to him just to make sure you guys are on the same page. But it's your job to actually communicate that because you want to change. He's not helping you. I've had so many couples come in together and I'm like, all right, Randy, your wife's going to lose 50 pounds. Are you in it? Yes. Okay. But it's a yes factor at this point. But teaching accountability is them showing up for themselves every day. Literally. You're here. You meet me every Tuesday. You're going to be here. Okay. Once I get them to actually show up, they're in. Number 2, meal plan. You have the blueprint. I'm giving you all the answers to the test. You do it, you will change, right? Yes. Once they start trickling down, I go, what happened? What is happening? What did you do? What needs to change? You always have to keep them on their toes because humans, I believe, they want to do it really, really bad, but they always find that wall. And my job is to always break down that wall and never get them to fail again. That's why I'm a good coach because I'm on your ass. I'm sorry.
Because you can do that.
I can do that.
100%.
But my job, again, you said it perfectly. I'm loving, I'm respectful, I'm low. But when I need to be that leader of, hey, you hired me to hold you accountable, I'm going to show up. And they go, oh, he's right. And it's a consistent battle. And honestly, most people after 3 months do it smooth sailing.
And at that point, they figured it out.
And
they can, at that point, continue.
And that's the idea. I don't want you to be with me for 2 years. I'm going to show you the tools, give you the blueprint, give you the answer, show you what to do. After that, it is on you to continue the path that you want to strive consistently, which is the lifestyle, living a healthy lifestyle, right? But then again, I have people that, oh, my mental health and my emotional health. And that's why I think, our business succeeds is because we're touching base on all 3.
I think there's something that we have to have as a part of this conversation relative. Well, first, I love fitness as a way to talk about this because it's a true meritocracy. Like you earn your results. You can't fake it. It's impossible. But it's also a deeper level in that, and I know you've seen this, Louis, where 30-day challenge, somebody could do a 30-day challenge and they'll be decent during the challenge, but then they'll drop off. The way to actually change someone's behavior isn't to address the behavior, ironically. It's to address their identity. So I know for me, when I first started taking health and fitness serious, and it was about 10 years ago, I was 265 pounds. I had just got off cancer. I had lymphoma. I was drinking all the time. Like I was a wreck of a person in my body. And I got connected with a guy named John Madsen, who
he had
a little
he plays
gym.
Football, has a gym in.
He's in Scottsdale now. He's the CEO and founder of Superhuman, which is a mindset and coaching deal. Fitness has a component, but it's more mindset related. And one of the first things that happened when I started in that environment is he's like, I want you to like find a picture of what you want your body to look like. Like I had to connect my identity, how I saw myself and the goal that I had with this thing that was like, okay, I want to look like Ryan Reynolds in Deadpool. Like I don't need to be super jacked, but I want to be Shred City and I want to have some bump to my muscles. Okay. So when I started incorporating that, it changed my values and my beliefs and my behaviors. So everything comes on an identity shift. That's where a lot of the things that people do to change and to transform would be so much more efficient if they would understand that simple hierarchy. How you see yourself on your identity level, that governs your values, the things that you give value to. Your values govern your beliefs and what you see and what you believe. And then what you allow as a behavior is a direct line straight down to your identity through those 3 things. And so fitness is a beautiful thing. It's like, I would be curious to kind of have you do some tests with this to see and to learn. You've got to already be doing this. If you're a successful gym owner and you do training and fitness, mindset is clearly a part of that. They have to be able to see themselves that way. That's the actual key to it. And when you bring it all back in with men's issues and health, like how a man sees himself dictates his values, beliefs, and behaviors. And so if at a core you recognize, I don't think I'm good this way, that's a sign. That's where you got to do some work. Yeah. God, universe, whatever, saying, yo, that right there, you did that thought, that's not helping.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
But I love that the behavior comes last.
Yeah.
It's these other things first that I think that we're missing out.
That people miss. And at an intellectual level, people don't really want to sit down with themselves and say, why am I struggling? Why am I not losing weight? Why can I not keep this job? Why am I not a good husband? People don't talk to themselves. People cannot be alone in their thoughts and figure out.
Well, I don't even think they ask those questions. I
They
think
don't,
they
dude.
just, well, I don't, I think it's such a deeper thing. They're just like, I'm not a good husband.
Yeah.
And that's it.
They don't
And that's
ask
it.
why I am
That's
not.
where it ends.
And they don't want to figure it
That's
out.
where it ends.
That's the problem.
And that leads me to my last point, Bryce, before we let you go. This idea of therapy, counseling, where does it have a place? When do you make that decision? How far do you go without it, with it? What are your thoughts on getting professional help?
Well, just a blanket statement, I'm all for it. Thankfully, there's a lot of modalities that are very helpful, whether it's actual, clinically trained therapists helping you. There's some great coaches out there and mentors that can help you. There's hypnotherapists. There's things like breath work. I just, on my podcast, just had a woman named Jen Coles on that I interviewed.
Oh, yeah. I should train Jen Coles.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Okay.
back in the
She's
day.
great. I've been to her breathwork sessions and I've had major events come in my mind, visions, releases in my body because of just the practice of holotropic and somatic breathwork. So there's the idea of somebody else out there that can help pull me to a different place. I'm all about that. I think when it comes to therapy and things like, you've got to be very mindful about what you want as the result of the therapy. And you have to be honest with yourself, because I've talked to people that go to therapy and they actually don't want their marriage to work. They just don't have the balls to leave. Or they hire a coach and the same thing. They're just like, it's more of an outward thing. Like, I don't really give a fuck. She said I needed to, whatever. And they're not being honest with themselves about what they want. So it kind of bastardizes what the therapy or the, experience or the whatever could help you with.
It's never going to work.
Of course not.
It's never going to work.
You have to want it to work. That's why it's an interesting thing, because with fitness and in coaching and all the other stuff, you hear these phrases like high ticket, like I'm a high ticket coach. Yeah. Well, people don't understand the psychology of why that is the case. It's about pain. If I'm going to come into a situation and this person, I believe, is going to help me achieve a new identity and hence a new result, I got to have skin in the game, man, or I'll never do it. So pricing in those things, it's a very psychologically kind of interesting thing to look at, because a lot of times the value of what you're paying is the fact that it forces you to level up out of fear of losing the money you invested.
100%.
Yeah, I love
And that's
that.
a beautiful thing,
It is.
because it gets you results. It's like, for example, my podcast business, I am what would be considered high ticket. I'm not cheap. It's an investment to work with me. But when you look at the roster of clients that I have and the successes that they have, it's unrivaled. They're all killers. And that's because to get into work with me, you got to already be at a certain level. And so it's kind of like I hacked the system. It's like I have the best clients in the world, and it's because I forced them to be the best clients to work with me.
And I think that
I
from
love
a,
that.
from a business perspective, that just makes sense, because you don't get the newbies that are like starting out. Maybe they're not going to want to do it. So you get people that are already established and understand that value.
I've never understood coaches that coach for free. That's the most useless thing ever. The money component changes the dynamic of the relationship.
And that's the key, that it actually helps the person that's being coached
Oh, 100%.
to pay.
It's truly an investment in themselves.
And they need to
They
understand that.
will prove to themselves whether that money was worth it or not.
I love that. Bryce, where can people find you? You got a bunch of content. You do podcasting business. Where can people plug into you?
So I have just two websites simply. I've got mediaautomated.com is my business website. And then my personal brand website is bryceprescott.com. I do stand-up comedy and I have a bunch of different hobbies, but most of my social media handles are my name. So Bryce Prescott is my Instagram handle, Bryce Prescott on Twitter, Bryce Prescott Official on TikTok. So just search my name in any of those and you'll find them. I don't have a blue check or anything, but I'm pretty easy to
But
find.
you're real.
I verified
real.
myself.
You verified
You
yourself.
verified yourself. I love that. Any closing
that.
thoughts, Lou?
No, I love that, man. And if you guys follow Bryce, he has amazing content. Remember, our goal is to give you guys a better perspective of life, how to think, how to view life differently. And I think a lot of us need to understand that we're all on the exact same page with y'all. We've all been through the exact same things, different life experiences that have shaped us. And this is why we're here. This is why we have what we have as men in our relationships, in our businesses, and it's all self-work. And I tell people every single day, it's all about self-work. I wouldn't be here. Tony wouldn't be here. Bryce wouldn't be here if we all didn't do the inner work to get us to a better place. 100%.
Well, thank you so much, Bryce. We appreciate you coming out. I know people are going to get tremendous value.
Yes.
Any closing words?
Well, I return that to you. Thank you for allowing me to be on your show and to have access to your platform this way. You guys are doing great work here. I'm honored that we were able to have this conversation, because it's very important that men realize that they can have the life they want. There's nothing stopping them. If they think there's something stopping them, that's just a farce in their head. Like, you can actually, there's ways to get everything you want in all areas of life.
No, there it is. I love that. Guys, with that being said, this has been episode number 7 of the Male Mind Podcast. Share it, pass it on, subscribe to the channel if you found this useful. Until next time.